Good afternoon. Now you're all trapped in here with me. So my name is Karen Gee, and I am the State and Local Government Applications Leader for Hewlett-Packard. I have about 20 years of experience working with our government customers, both state and county, and then some city level as well. What I do is mostly work with them to come up with solutions to their business problems. So application development, mobile application development, and information management and analytics are my areas of specialty. What I want to talk to you about today is the full strategy for mobile access to your data and how to mobilize and handle personal devices on your network. So I have BYOD in my title here, and I want to make one point before I get moving, which is we get pretty focused on bring your own device, and the focus that we tend to bring to that is around employee devices. But if any of you guys are building citizen-facing applications, every single one of those is being accessed by somebody's own personal device. So just think about that for a second. So I'm going to ask you all to stand up, please. Up, 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 up. I promise I won't embarrass anyone. If you are a private sector employee, a vendor, someone, can you sit down? Okay, great. Thanks, Mark. How many of you have a work-issued smartphone or pad? Okay. So you guys go ahead and sit down. How many of you are accessing some type of work application on your personal device? One down, okay. Okay, back up, one more vote. How many of you are in an agency that is building a mobile application or has a mobile application out there for your citizens, not necessarily for your internal folks? So, about half. Yeah, it's anyone that might be accessing an application that you've built that is a citizen, not necessarily an employee. No, it would be your division, your particular group. Okay, so we're good, thank you. It always helps me to know, what you guys are coming from an experience standpoint. So, the big picture in mobility. It is not about the application on the device, and it's not about the device. It is about accessing data and accessing applications from anywhere with any device. So regardless of the location, regardless of the device type, having similar access to those apps. And we tend to get real focused on two specific things: application development and application security. But there is a larger picture that we seem to be missing a lot of times. So first you have to start with looking at what are the benefits for me and for my agency with mobility. And they're pretty big. There are some things that you can do if you can build a mobile application for your employees. Like maybe if you don't need everybody to come to the office every day, you can reduce some of your real estate cost. That's not necessarily something you would think of when you're thinking about how do I build a mobile application, but it's the big picture type of benefits that you can see. There's also benefits to your citizenry in allowing them to report issues and communicate with you regardless of where they are or what they're doing at the time or what kind of device they have. And like anything that has a lot of benefit, there are also a significant amount of risks with it. So your current applications in the mobile model, the ones that you have already, that you work to maintain and that keep your government agency moving, those are the ones that are really the backbone of the whole mobile system. That's where the processing happens. That's where the data gets stored. And those are the pieces that you want to decide whether you make accessible to your citizens or accessible to your employees in a mobile manner. You have to make some choices to do that. What kind of applications are you going to put out there? who is going to be allowed to access that information in those applications? And how closely are you going to tie access into those apps? Are you going to have everybody have an ID, maybe a network ID on your network? Or are you going to put that data and information in those applications in the cloud? Once you make that decision, there's another set of decisions you need to make on what kinds of devices you're going to allow to access. Because there's almost a limitless array of device types, operating systems, and browser combinations. Once you've made those decisions, you get to decide how you're going to build your mobile application. Are you going to use HTML5? Are you going to use a mediating layer like Coney? Are you going to go and do native applications for each device you allow to access? So a lot to think about, and what I'm going to walk through today is how to consider those choices, because there is not a right answer that fits every situation, every agency, or every group. There are just an awful lot of things that you all have to consider. So let's start with the first piece. What makes a good mobile application? Well, the best ones are things that can be made into a discrete function on their own. They have a specific purpose and a benefit from being mobile. So for a citizen-facing application, the base purpose needs to be something that the citizen sees as being of benefit to them. The best applications make it easier or faster for a citizen to do business with government. For example, this City of Anaheim application that I have up here, it is something that's evolved over time. Initially, it started as a way to report graffiti and potholes from wherever you are. Takes advantage of some capabilities on that device, like the phone, like the camera and the GPS. So to report it, you just take a picture of the problem and send it in, instead of having to do a lot of data entry on the location and everything else. But it has evolved. Now folks can use it to find libraries. They can find bike paths and community centers, and they can find the nearest fire station and a whole host of other things. And there's been a number of different releases of this application as time's gone on. But the one thing they all have in common is these are tasks that are good to do while you're on the go. So they can be responded to immediately on a mobile device, and it saves you some time. You don't have to go home and do it from your home computer. You don't have to make a phone call and maybe take a chance of getting put on hold and having 5 minutes of just waiting. So on to the other side, what makes a good employee-facing application? Because one of the biggest bang for your buck isn't necessarily about citizen-facing applications. It is about internal employee-facing applications, things that make your employees empowered. So again, same thing about having a discrete set of functions. Also, consider things that have a minimized amount of data entry, because one of the things about these devices is they're not all good at everything. There are some things that I can do on my mobile phone really easily, other things that I choose to do on my pad, other things that I want my laptop to do it because there's an awful lot of data entry and it's a pain. So, you know, right device for the job, right tool for the job. The best case scenario for a mobile app designed for a mobile device, reduced amount of data entry. And where you have a mobile workforce, where you've got folks that are inspectors or enforcement officers or auditors that largely work outside of the office, a mobile application is something that they can greatly benefit from. I mean, I know a lot of groups still go out and do their inspections and do other kinds of work like that, and then either have to go home at night and type up reports, or they're in the car handwriting reports and sending them in, and somebody else has to do manual data entry, or they have to come into the office a couple days a week. And really, if they had a mobile-facing application, they could be doing a lot more of this on the go and probably be a heck of a lot more productive. The other thing is there's some things that are just universally useful on the go. Email, in my case, time cards, because I always forget to enter mine on Friday, so it's a good thing that I have mobile access. But things that are inherently useful from any place that you might be. And you can't get away from talking about the cloud when you talk about mobility. You want to talk about access anywhere, inside, outside the firewall. The cloud is your point of access anywhere, although you can enable that from your own systems as well. But how do you decide when the cloud's going to be good for you? It's really good when you can use the chief component, the chief feature of the cloud that makes it most useful. That elasticity that it has, the capability to handle a small number of transactions or a large number of transactions without having to always have the hardware and software to handle the peaks. So there's a great example of that here in California. Downstairs, if you go to the Board of Elections, they have their application for election night reporting in the cloud. And the reason they've done that is they have a couple of very sharp peaks throughout the year. One day, everyone in California gets to vote. The next day, nobody's voting. It really doesn't benefit them to be able to handle that peak 365 days a year. So that elastic capability is really beneficial for them. And they put their application in the cloud for that reason. So how do you decide whether you go to the cloud or not? Can you predict your usage reliably? If the answer is no, you may want to look at the cloud. If you can't figure out how many mobile devices are going to be accessing, again, you may want to look at the cloud. You might be surprised by how low the volume is or how high. If you have really significant peaks and valleys, that takes advantage of that expansion and shrinking capability. And if there are no inherent security issues in the application architecture that you've chosen. So if you can answer those questions, please consider the cloud. If it doesn't necessarily make sense to you, there's no mandate to use it. So what I was saying before, there are a large number of device makers. There are a diverse number of operating systems. Those operating systems have different versions and different versions of browsers. And it's really hard to predict who's going to be the leader in the mobile devices. I mean, back in June of 1997, when Apple came on the scene with their iOS, it looked like they were poised for long-term leadership. And as of third quarter 2012, 75% of all devices run on Android. Who would have ever seen that coming? Who would have thought that BlackBerry, which was ubiquitous in the early 2000s, would not be the leader now, but would be playing a game of catch-up? And Microsoft as well. And then there are people that are using old devices. I mean, last year, my company discontinued support for the WebOS operating system. But there are still people out there using Palm devices. So you have to make a choice. You have to choose what you're going to support. Are you going to choose specific devices to support, or are you going to support them all? And you can support them all, but what I will tell you is you can't test for them all. It's just not feasible. So when I talk about supporting them all, there are a number of different choices when you're developing your application. You can do native application development, a specific mobile application for each device. So you can do a mobile application for Android, you can do one for Windows, you can do one for Apple iOS. The pros of that is that the user experience is very specific for each device that you have, and it allows you to take advantage of everything those devices offer without worrying about incompatibility with another device. One of the other pros is you're downloading some information to that device, so you are not as dependent on the carrier speed of the provider as you might be if you're using a different method. The cons, it creates a separate application silo that has to be maintained for each one of these device types that you support. And one of the things that you need to think about is that you will be doing multiple releases. Mobile applications are not one and done. So another option that you have is responsive design using something like HTML5, where you actually code your support right into your existing web-facing application. The positives there, that can support most devices, although, like I mentioned before, you're probably going to want to limit the amount of devices that you actually do testing for, because you'll give yourself a huge headache. They're maintained with the core application, so it does not create any separate silos for you. The downside is it's not as user experience friendly as the individualized device design. So you're not able to take advantage of everything that Apple offers that might be different than what Android offers. You're kind of limited to a common set of capabilities. And the other thing is your connection to that application, if you're the mobile end user, is highly dependent on the speed that your carrier is providing. So your ability to download pages and to download data is dependent on whether you're on 3G, 4G, no G. There's also a third option, which is a cross-platform tool. Like, well, we have one that's called HP Everywhere. Kony has Kony. It is a third layer that's put between your application and those devices that has a very large database of device features. And basically, it takes your code and kind of emulates how it should appear on the device, sending to the device something that looks more like a native application. The downside to that, because it sounds great, you don't have an application silo that you've created. The downside to it is the per user licensing that some of these things charge. If you don't know how many users you're going to have, or you're something like the California Board of Elections where you may have everyone in the state of California accessing, you probably don't want to buy licenses for everyone. So I've talked about how to decide what applications to make mobile. And we've talked about who's going to have the ability to access those applications, what devices they're going to use, and the style of development that you're going to use. At this point, it is time to put in place your written strategy. So first, you need to look at the existing policies that you have. I bet with the move to mobility, some of them are going to be drastically out of date. You'll want to look at development standards, testing standards, standards of business conduct for your employees that are going to be accessing. Those things, you have to figure out which ones need to be updated, which ones need to be completely rewritten, and which ones are just not applicable anymore. Next thing you do is start defining your communication infrastructure. You're going to be communicating with everybody through apps, but are you also going to add email to that, SMS messaging? Are you going to develop blogs? You're going to be much more highly collaborative with your citizenry and your employees. So are you going to allow things like Facebook? Are you going to have tie-in to Facebook? And then the last thing that you're going to do is establish the architecture to support your mobile applications. Once you've done that, you are ready to make mobility work for your agency while reducing the risks as best as you can. One of the things I will say is these are all of the steps. Not everyone follows all of the steps. Early adapters tend to move forward without establishing a strategy, maybe not even necessarily thinking about the fact that they need to do a full mobile architecture. And that's okay. I mean, the other thing that early adapters do is they acknowledge that they're accepting a certain amount of risk to move forward more rapidly than everyone else. And they understand that they might need to take a redo and do it over. So while I'm talking about all the steps, I don't necessarily believe that everyone here will feel the need to follow all the steps, but you know what they are. So I love this quote. There is nothing hotter for consumers than tablet devices and smartphones. There is also nothing more terrifying for IT than tablet devices and smartphones. And in all honesty, I remember this the first time around. back in the mid-90s when we started exposing applications over the web. The situation isn't really much different now. It just seems like it's a lot more different because there are more mobile devices. But in all honesty, it's still the same level of exposure that you've already had. So these are some kind of interesting statistics here. And these are enterprise that is not necessarily just government, but all enterprise. About 90% of government or commercial business has somebody that is accessing their network with smartphones and tablets. And there are about 2 times more now. Oh God, that rendered horribly. Okay, there are 2 times more now than there were a couple of years ago. And there are some groups that actually are seeing 5 times more now. About 3/4 of the groups out there that were surveyed say that mobile devices have contributed to increased security incidents. And about that same number say that careless employees are more dangerous than the average hacker to your security. And I mean, that has always been true. If you don't password protect your device, or you lose your device and don't tell anyone about it, all that data that you have on that device is out there for somebody else to take. So what are folks putting on mobile devices? Just about everybody's got email out there. And if you have email, you've probably got business contacts. Some of you, like I have a lot of customer contacts on my phone. And I will tell you that I am a 2-device user for that. I have a personal device where I download whatever applications I want. And I have a corporate device where I download absolutely nothing that is not corporate approved and secured, because I have my customers' contact information there. And I don't need them being asked to join Facebook. And almost every application that you download asks for some permissions to access data on your phone, to access your contact list to help you make calls or something like that. So be vigilant about that kind of thing. The other things that we have on our devices, especially on pads, network login information, the network address, and possibly some enterprise information. There have been incidents where people, particularly in the developer community, have made a small copy of a database of an agency without masking the personally identifiable information on there for the citizenry. So, yep, same thing. We don't really want that out there running around unsecured. So when you're developing a mobile application, you're focused on things like business requirements. How am I going to identify the user? How do I get the information that they want to them? How do I let them do a transaction? How are they going to make a payment to me for the license that they just purchased? You're worried about maybe giving them some reporting capabilities. And you're thinking about how to deal with users that are accessing from a device that's old and slow. What's the user experience going to be? On the other side of the coin, there's some guy that's looking at it like this, who is building an application for Android that looks very cute, like maybe Angry Birds, and he's trying to figure out how he's going to get personally identifiable information off that, how he's going to stalk his ex-girlfriend, or how he's going to get some banking and credit card information to go out there and buy himself something fun. So your biggest security, the thing that you can do to secure your devices, isn't really about the device at all. It's about securing your application. And we're back to what I mentioned in the beginning. When we talk about bring your own device, everybody gets a little wrapped around the axle, thinking that it is all about internal employees. But honestly, every application you're building for the citizens is being accessed from their own device. You have no idea what they are downloading. And if they've accidentally downloaded something that's malicious, that's going to start trolling through all the other applications that they have, looking for vulnerabilities and sending it back to the mothership. So what do you do if you're putting together a citizen application? You can't control the device. You can't put software out on it that allows you to wipe that device should it be compromised. But you can control your application. You can code it from a perspective where you are looking for security vulnerabilities throughout the development lifecycle. That means starting with requirements, going to design and development. You can't just test that stuff in. You can avoid storing any personally identifiable information on those devices. Just don't let them download it. Make them access it from your application instead. For any applications that they can access specific account information, not just general information about where to submit a tax form or something, make sure they have a user account and a password and require strong password protection. And don't store ever, ever, ever any kind of alphabet soup data on a personal user's device. Anything like HIPAA compliant information, FSMA compliance, anything like that. If there is a compliance regulation around how the data is handled, do not download it to a citizen-facing application. Allow them to access it on your servers or in the cloud or wherever you have been able to secure it, but don't let it be moved down to their device. So for internal employees, now that I've kind of beat up bring your own device as a scary strategy, why is everyone looking for it? There's really two primary drivers, and one of them is cost. Nobody really wants to pay as an agency to replace devices that really have an 18 to 24 month life before you get tired of them and don't want to use them, or before the application's operating system has moved into so many more new capabilities that your old devices can no longer take advantage of it. The second is really an employee satisfaction thing. It's allowing the end users to have the experience that they want. I mean, you know, I would rather carry an iPad than a clunky no-name pad. You know, there's just a certain amount of geek cachet to that. So, but it's a balancing act, really. Because there is such an array of devices and such an array of operating systems, at some point you're just going to have to draw a line in the sand and say, well, you know, you may access it with these other devices, but these 10 things are what I'm going to support, or these 5 things. And typically what I tell my customers is, when they're talking about mobile testing, do 5 things. Test for the latest version of iOS. Test for the latest version of Android. Test using Windows 8. Test using a 10-inch pad. Test using a 7-inch pad. And from that point, you will probably capture 90% of the users out there. Don't spend your time worrying about backward compatibility for the last 15 versions of Android. It's kind of a losing battle. I mean, I don't know if you guys all realized, but since last November, when Android released their Jelly Bean version of their operating system, they've done 3 releases already. I mean, that's 3 releases in 5 months. You can't keep up. So basically, draw that line in the sand. And you can support as many or as few as you're going to get business benefit from. So when you're supporting the end user internal employee device, there are some things you can do to secure that device. We have a policy in our company that allows you to bring your own device or to use a corporate device. Now, I've chosen a corporate device just because I know that I am one of those leading edge people that downloads things that may be potentially risky. So I'm not going to keep that with my other data. But for situations where people are accessing on their own device, we ask them to download an enterprise software. And what that does is it enables us to actually manage their device, to make sure that the configuration settings on it are really done to comply with our guidelines. So it's mail settings, it's security policies, it's VPN access, all of that is managed through this one software that is mandatory to have on your device before you can actually access any of our servers with it. There's a security management component to it that handles the security configuration, makes sure you have password protection on it rather than just simple swipe protection, there's on-device encryption, and there is also a remote wipe capability. So if I lose my phone today, my corporate phone, I can just call in and say, I lost my phone. And well, the guy on the other end of the phone might be like, really? He'll also wipe that device, and I don't have to worry about it anymore. There's also an application management component that you can put in that it enables you to make sure that that user is using the latest version of your own applications, but it also will allow you to white and blacklist applications from the various stores. So if there are known issues out there with certain applications that have been discovered, you can blacklist them so they cannot be downloaded to that device. And that's all in a push format, so that device is updated every time it connects. It also gives you some inventory management, so you know how many devices are accessing, and you can identify them. You can identify who is doing what, when, and where, which is pretty darn useful. So that is probably, between that and making secure applications, those are the two best pieces of bring your own device advice that I can give you. Yes? If we know about the app and it's been blacklisted, it just won't, you can't download it. The software will actually prevent you from downloading it and tell you it's a prohibited app. Now, obviously, that is like any other thing. It's a game of catch-up because you have to have the characteristics of that application in order to identify it.
One of the things that was brought up at last year's conference and also this year is they're talking about containerized type of solution.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the issues I said, well, if there are apps as part of the OS or functionality as part of the OS or apps,
Mm-hmm.
where they work with the container, and they said some will, some won't. If they don't, you gotta customize the apps, and that means you have to get permission.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably going to happen.
Right.
Resources to make those changes, to do that. So if you didn't want to sort of like have a whitelist, blacklist,
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an alternative to something? Because most people want to say, hey, if you have your own device, we blacklist everything that we consider a potential risk, even enterprise sometimes that, that's a major issue about going too far.
So I don't have a silver bullet, and I don't have any magic. Each agency needs to decide how much risk they're willing to accept. Some agencies are at lower risk than others.
So do you have a solution from the developer application side in terms of managing those types of things if someone wants an interact type of solution without having to change every application? Is that really the answer to that, probably?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for you, but if you'd stay a couple minutes afterwards, I will grab your information and I will get somebody that might have a better chance of answering the technology piece of that. I have a feeling that the answer is going to be, things have evolved so quickly that there isn't really a good answer for it, but I could be surprised because things have evolved very quickly and I might not have kept up on the area.
Yeah, I just talked to somebody in BlackBerry,
Mm-hmm.
retail, for example, who was like, they're kind of thinking the same way where probably there's either partition or a layer to the personal application, the personal side of things in the UI, and then there's the corporate side of things. So apparently there's a way to separate those two things out, and that's what they'll kind of showcase.
Well, I'm sure there is a way on a per device basis, depending on the device. Doubtful on Android. More likely for iOS or BlackBerry, something that is more specialized, particularly BlackBerry that specializes in enterprise devices. I could see them being able to do some kind of partitioning What I can also see, however, is if their device gets popular enough in the marketplace, there's going to be somebody that spends some time figuring out how to get through that partition. You know, there's nothing that was ever developed, that there's no wall that's ever built that somebody can't figure out how to get over eventually. So.
You mentioned the Microsoft laptops.
Mhm.
Is there free resources out there or resources out there that in terms of if they're going to install it out on a corporate device or allow somebody to install it on a personal device that says, okay, here's the risk for it, that would help me more easily determine.
Not.
We may not determine all the risks by reading the.
It doesn't necessarily give you that information, but there is a Norton security program that is a free download that will at least check the application as it's downloading against their list of good and evil and basically do some level of vulnerability checking. Because it's free, you've gotten what you've paid for. I have a lot of trust in Symantec, but the paid for application offers a lot more features with it. Well, they don't tell you to that level. They tell you problem. They don't tell you what the problem. There isn't a developer thing. Like if you are a developer and you want that level of information, I look at it from a user's perspective. I just want user, good and evil. Evil, okay, I don't want that. Yeah. But yeah, what I would suggest is talking with Symantec, because I'm guessing they have that level of information. Same with, I can't think of the other company that's doing a lot of, lost my words, but there is another company that does a lot of mobile device security in a similar way that also offers a free download and has a more expensive one. It may be possible to tie your development team in with them, and there may be a tool that they offer for you. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I think part of the app's problem is from a website, you're looking at versions of HTML or versions of scripting, and that's all pretty well known. The first few years that we were developing web, it wasn't there, and I think that's, again, catch up. But thanks for your question. You gave me something to think about. So I think we've all got to the point where you get the fact that the mobile lifecycle isn't just about the device. It's not just about the application. It's not just about the security. It's about getting the right strategy in place that kind of encompasses the whole outlook. It's about getting your architecture together. And it's about developing your applications securely and then allowing access through the devices. So if you guys manage to navigate this successfully, you're going to increase the capabilities of your agency drastically. You'll probably come up with some increased employee satisfaction, and you'll have citizens that are happier too. So think past your little box. Think about the cloud. Think about how that mobile application is going to integrate with everything else that you've got going on in the back end that is the backbone. And then think about security. And then think about the application development in the device. So that's it for me. So are there any other questions? Okay. Oh, got one. Mm-hmm.
How does HP measure productivity?
So you just hit on a lunchtime conversation that I was just having with people that I'm working with. We measure productivity in a couple of different ways depending on what you're doing. If you do what I do, my productivity is measured by how many people I touch. As I go out into the world and I do sessions and I talk to people, how many presentations can I handle? How many customer discussions can I handle? How much do I sell in a year? And I'm measured on that. If I'm a developer, I'm measured on how I meet my project schedule and if I get everything done and what the quality metric is for that. And that's one of the things that you get into as an agency is what are your metrics for productivity? And I think that's the real stumbling block. I mean, we have some just because we're pretty much coin operated. So we need to know if our resources are providing us the value for which they receive a salary. So we've had metrics in place for a long time. But for an agency, you may be measuring it first at the macro level. How many people do I need to do the same workload I did last year? You know, do I now need less? Am I able to take on additional projects that I wasn't able to do before? And I mean, the ugly government truth is once I have a lot of retirements, do I need to make the same amount of hires for the folks that have retired, or am I able to use fewer resources? I mean, that's the kind of things that I think government's going to be measured on. But individually, as a manager, I would be looking at the tasks folks do every day and what their throughput is. And I'd be measuring that probably on a every 2-week to 4-week basis to see if there's improvements, particularly if you're going to a mobile situation where you're allowing people to work outside the office. Maybe you're in an agency that is trying to do some real estate consolidation. There is some discomfort that people have as managers in allowing people to work in a site that they're not physically present with their boss in. But if you've got an employee that's not productive, chances are they're not productive right under your nose. It's just that their butt's in their seat all day. You know, it's not, so it's the same way you've always figured out if people are productive and maybe raising the bar a little bit to see if they become more productive. I know that having email on my device has made it easier for me to be more productive when I'm on the road. That downtime that I have when I'm sitting in an airport or something is now filled with responding to emails rather than just kind of sitting there munching on a bag of chips. So, you're welcome. Anything else? All right, well, thank you for coming. I appreciate you attending the last session of the day.